You know what's fascinating about death? The way we handle it hasn't really changed in centuries. It's still passed down from person to person like an ancient craft. But here's what most people don't realize about funeral services.
That's interesting timing because I was just looking into this remarkable story about a Baptist pastor who learned his craft through an old school apprenticeship. It really shows how these sacred traditions get preserved.
Well, tell me more about that. How does someone even begin to learn something as delicate as guiding families through loss?
So, in this case, this pastor learned everything from his mentor, a seasoned pastor. The whole thing started when their church lost both their youth minister and associate pastor at the same time.
Hmm, that must have been quite a transition. You're suddenly thrown into handling these incredibly sensitive moments without formal training.
Right. And that's where his mentor stepped in. He basically took this pastor under his wing, showing him everything from preparing messages to conducting services.
You know what really strikes me about this kind of mentorship? It's not just about learning the words to say, it's about picking up all those subtle cues about how to carry yourself, how to provide comfort.
That's exactly it. And one of the key things this pastor learned was about making each service deeply personal. He developed this practice of combining traditional scriptures with the deceased person's favorite verses.
That's such a thoughtful approach, finding that sweet spot between tradition and personalization. I imagine it helps families feel like the service truly honors their loved one rather than just following some generic template.
Well, what's particularly interesting is how open minded he became about different approaches. He's never refused to conduct a funeral and has no objections to things that might be controversial in some circles, like cremation.
That kind of flexibility must be crucial today when families might have all sorts of different beliefs and traditions. Has he ever encountered any particularly challenging situations?
That's the surprising part. He says he hasn't had any strange requests or unusual situations. It's almost as if the gravity of these moments naturally guides people toward what matters most.
I wonder if that speaks to something deeper about human nature, how we all sort of instinctively know what's appropriate when we're faced with loss, regardless of our backgrounds.
Hmm, and it really highlights how these crucial life skills get passed down from one generation to the next, like links in a chain.
Speaking of which, let's talk about the actual learning process. I mean, you can't just read a manual about how to handle grief. There must be so many nuances that can only be picked up through observation.
Oh, absolutely. The mentee learned primarily by watching his mentor in action, noting everything from his tone of voice to his body language during services.
That reminds me of how other professional skills are passed down, like um, how surgeons learn by observing experienced doctors. There's this whole unspoken language you have to pick up.
And what's fascinating is how this knowledge gets refined over time, with each generation adding their own insights while maintaining those core principles.
You know what I find really powerful about this whole approach? The humility of it. Pre-Wet isn't trying to reinvent the wheel. He's focused on carrying forward these important traditions while making them meaningful for each family.
That kind of humility probably serves him well, since these moments aren't about the efficient, they're about the families and their loved ones.
And I think that's really the key insight here, how this delicate balance between tradition and personalization helps people navigate one of life's most difficult transitions.
Looking ahead, do you think these traditions will continue to evolve as society changes?
Well, that's what's so fascinating about this whole thing. While the specific practices might adapt, the fundamental human need to find meaning in loss remains constant. It's like this timeless thread that connects us all.
So, in a way, these funeral traditions are like a bridge between past and present, helping us maintain our humanity even as everything else changes.
Exactly. And that's why having people like this pastor who understand both the weight of tradition and the need for personal connection is so crucial. They're the ones who help us navigate these universal human experiences with grace and meaning.